quite significant size and, well, being as heavy as a semi-truck. Then we moved into late 1970s, early 1980s with the PC. From PC, we got information essentially on our tables. With internet and mobile, that moved into our pockets. And the next step is reducing that latency and bringing the technology, bring the information and bringing knowledge ultimately directly into our eyeballs. So the challenge that we face is first and foremost creating content. How to avoid all the pitfalls that other technologies went through in many iterations before they became mainstream. As we all know, mobile phones existed for a good 2 decades before they came mainstream. So how do we make sure that technology gets developed, that the content gets developed, and that we basically produce something for enterprise users, consumers, and hopefully make the world a better place. So first and foremost, we need to talk about workforce. So from what we see, universities are playing a critical role, actually more so than in any point in time before. Universities are playing that critical role where we need to educate people how to create content and of course avoid the don'ts of VR, because at the end of the day, a pretty bad VR can make us all sick, but then again, so was with your first airplanes and working in VR. Our estimate is that 3 years from now, there is going to be roughly 320,000. We know that this is a very low number, but this is the number that we believe it's realistic, as it aligns with developments in universities. And the reason for VR First actually came to be that many universities have been contacted us, and we have 553 universities in our network, and there can never be enough. And those universities that reached to us said, students are contacting us, they want to do VR, professors, fellow peers such as yourself, they have an issue that they cannot get enough headsets, they cannot get enough VR-capable systems, and as we know, without properly addressing the education and educational system, there can be no progress. And as I said on the previous slide, we have experienced quite a lot of challenges as the technology was getting to market. First and foremost, there are many technology standards that are missing. And of course, if the standards are missing, you're basically forced to choose your path of development and, more importantly, path of education. Which of the players, under quotes, which of the industry players you go with? How do you make sure that you can address the needs of universities, the needs of students, and the needs of market itself? And then again, if we move from university into a standard market, we faced with the fact that universities operate on a 3-year educational cycle, 4, 5, 8, and more, and that most of the industry players operate in quarterly mindset and essentially refreshing their products once a year. And at the same time, that refresh cycle, which is not being created talking to universities and collaborating, leads to the fact that we don't have high quality content. And hardware industry will blame the software will blame the hardware, but in the end of the day, we're not going to have consumers, enterprises, ultimately doctors and patients. If I can bring an example from the medical field, they're not going to get a solution which they need. So in a recent survey, which was done with, in collaboration with Perkins Coie and Upload, we see that the biggest challenge facing the mixed realities industry, so VR and AR and others, is inadequate content offerings. And at the end of the day, if there is no critical application, why would consumers and businesses adopt the technology at all? And when you cover the technological limitations, which come from the fact that the industry doesn't talk to each other, we basically reach 2/3 of the market which is unsure about the future of VR. Our vision and our mission is very simple. We want to work with universities, with the industry, with the governments, with development banks, and create an ecosystem that shortens the path to innovation more so than any time before. How many decades it took for cars to become mainstream, and then how many years it took for a tablet to reach 1 billion users, or a mobile phone, or a TV. Let's face it, in the world today, there are more people using mobile phones than using toothbrushes, which from our perspective, as a Western world, we feel that that's a little bit weird. Then again, when we look into markets, into countries that are much greater, but they're often on the side because they don't get time in media, we have, how do we generate the next critical person? How do we come with an innovator? At the end of the day, in the United States, one of the most commonly spoken persons about is Steve Jobs, who is a child of Syrian immigrants. We talk a lot about Elon Musk, who is a South African. So how do we make sure, how do we enable, not to make sure, simply how do we enable users to actually come and start shaping the world into being a better place, if I can be a little bit idealistic? We believe that we are first can resolve a part of the problem. We're trying to establish a global network. That means universities from cross fields. I don't care whether you're a doctor, a future doctor, are you an astrophysicist, are you an electrical engineer, computer science major, or professor in all these fields. At the end of the day, organizations such as IEEE have proven that multidisciplinary collaboration is more so than possible, and as a result, the whole world today runs on semiconductor products. We hope that we are first by working with the industry, with investments, with investment institutions such as not just venture capital funds, but development banks and governments, that we can shorten the path to innovation, reduce latency, and more importantly, create a reduction in cost of education for every field that we hope that we're going to touch. And I would like to raise your attention to the first lab that we opened 11 months ago. So this lab is located at the Bahçeli University in Istanbul, Turkey. And over the past 11 months, students of that university created 20 projects. As we all know, gaining funding for a university project is difficult. Let's face it. You're a young student, whether you're male or female, you have to prove that your idea has market potential. Yet from this lab, in 11 months, there are 8 projects which are now in final negotiations of receiving funding. 8. That is 33%. We're not saying that our system is the best, but we hope that we're going to make a positive impact, because there is absolutely no barriers in those labs between the companies that worked on building it and the knowledge database that came associated with it. It's accessible 24/7, but we do kind of ask some students that they don't spend 24 hours in a lab. And we really hope that those 8 ideas are just going to be the first 8 ideas to receive funding. And hopefully, in 26 labs that we have now opened worldwide, there are going to be plenty more of innovators which will gain funding. More importantly, we are first, as labs, operates on an idea that even when you receive funding, that you don't drop out of university, move across the world, and lose a year or 2 in adjusting yourself to a new situation, which is the funding model of today. We want to have equal opportunity, equal systems, not just what are currently my words, but basically that it really is. It doesn't matter whether you're in Africa, India, Pakistan, mainland China, or United States, in some of the states which are typically considered flyover states, which I personally take as an offense, that we can get that innovation across the field, no matter in what country you are. So what is VR First in terms of size? So we have 553 universities which have contacted us. We are very grateful to be working with IEEE on establishing a network with even more universities. So out of the 1485 organizations that have approached us, some of them are nonprofit, some of them are, well, you can imagine, even high schools. Yes, there are commercial companies that have approached us, but there are also high schools and different educational facilities. Again, 26 confirmed labs, and we hope to achieve funding so that we can cover these 254 universities that have that we're in advanced negotiations, and that ultimately every university that approached us will have the VR First lab. Now let me bring you some attention to what the VR First actually does. Talk is cheap, as we all know, so we hope that the effort that our small team is making is an impact. So professors, roughly 6 to 7 months ago, told us 51 students per headset. Today, after working with our partners, which are Oculus, OSVR, and HTC, we have brought that number down to 18. I sincerely hope that in the next 12 months, we're going to be putting that number to 1-to-1. And then to start covering headsets which we're not able to cover today. There are 4 times as many VR headsets as 6 months ago. And again, I do hope that in 12 months that number is literally going to be a non-subject of discussion, that every student will have the opportunity to do and develop what he or she wants. And I would like to bring your attention to the fact that universities are actually the earliest adopters of new and emerging technologies. Whether it was mobile, personal computing, or the internet, everything started with universities. Whether it's a 30-ton modem down in UCLA, or a VR or AR headset, universities and initiatives that are coming from professors are the key to adoption of a technology. And as you can see, before 2015, there were roughly 16% of universities that were thinking about VR, and 23% that were thinking about AR. And over the past 2 years, that number has actually shifted. Now there are more universities that want to do VR as a first step and then move into AR. And as we all know, without artificial intelligence, deep learning and machine learning, AR will not be able to take over. And this is kind of our cloud of interest. And of course, the largest interest is gaming, because first and foremost, we're an organization that came out of, that spun out of Crytek. But when you take a look at history, tourism, and architecture, the number of projects that we have in the pipeline is greater than gaming. What I would really say it's interesting is that the number of educational projects is actually almost outnumbering other sections which are more commercial. Well, this is what we already addressed, but what I believe is really interesting is that now 79% universities own VR headsets, and 71% of universities in our ecosystem own AR headsets. Now, the VR headset distribution is actually what we feel is pretty interesting. So Oculus actually dominates our universities, followed by Vive and OSVR, and of course Gear VR for mobile. And when you really take a look at this, these numbers look great for Oculus, but bear in mind they had a 40-year head start over anybody. In AR headset distribution, what we can see is that Google Glass still makes for 11% of all AR devices, but that companies like Vuzix, Epson with its Moverio, are actually gaining quite a lot of traction. But of course, Microsoft's HoloLens, with its support, owns, I would say, 43% of universities. In terms of controllers, Leap Motion is without any doubt the leader, and I think that the popular price of their development kit, which is I think $80 US, is one of the reasons why it's such a huge momentum. And of course, maturity of tools, because without a good SDK you cannot get good hardware. 11 VR-capable PCs per university, and now VR-First is really trying to change that, and hopefully every student in our ecosystem is going to get access to a VR-capable PC. And what's real good to see is that 65% of all the universities are looking to set up a VR and AR stations. The preferences is that 84% of universities like to buy branded, 16% like to build custom PCs for their own use. So we've included the top 15 PC manufacturers worldwide that produce VR-capable systems. In terms of GPU preference and a CPU preference, NVIDIA and Intel essentially currently dominate the segment, which we would kind of attribute to the maturity of the software that you can actually create and develop VR content on. And in a nutshell, that's it for VR-First.
Panasonic.